I am live. I'm reading Prelude to the Landing on Planet Earth. It is a book which was published 1977 by Stuart Holroyd, and it describes a journey through the Middle East in 1974. Here we were at the beginning of where it was chosen who was going to go, and the original chosen, Bobby, did not want to go. This is entitled A Change of Channels, and we are going through here the various communications the group had who was going to do this work. A publisher friend, in a letter declining the present book, wrote to me, "If the Ossining experience turns out to be illusory or a hoax, then the tone of earnest inquiry in which it is described will be entirely inappropriate, it seems to me. I see his point, and I have chosen to take the risk of adopting, in relation to the material, an attitude of serious, I would not say earnest, which suggests humorless, inquiry, precisely because I am satisfied that it is neither illusory nor a hoax. I have participated in enough communications now, and have got to know the people involved well enough to be satisfied on this point. I'm not saying that John and Andrija may not be wrong in believing that they are conversing with extraterrestrials, but to be wrong is not necessarily to be deluded, and I am satisfied that these are sane and serious men whose claims deserve to be taken seriously, instead of being peremptorily derided. Derision is often the recourse of mediocre minds when they are confronted with novelty. Such minds seek comfort and safety by huddling together, and it seems to me that an uncritically derisive huddle is not more admirable, though it may be safer, than an uncritically credulous one. So I make no apologies for making the communications seriously and trying to assess them intelligently. In the period covered by the narrative so far, there are three things that are particularly impressive. One, the thematic consistency of the communications. Two, evidence of supernormal cognition. And three, paranormal physical phenomena. Let us consider these in turn. Thematic consistency. In the communications held between March and June 1974, there were two distinct channels, Bobby and Phyllis, and three different communicators identified themselves, Korean, Rhea, and Tom. Yet the information channeled contains no contradictions or anomalies. But on the contrary, in respect of a number of themes, it follows a process of development with internal consistency coming through different channels and allegedly from different sources. We are given to understand that Korean, Rhea, and Tom are in communication among themselves, and the consistency of the information they give supports this proposition. For instance, the theme of the landing was introduced by Korean in the first communication held. Korean also stated that the function of Bobby and of the group around him was to make mankind aware of the existence of other civilizations in order to prepare for the landing, and that there were other groups working on this project in other ways. These points were reiterated by Rhea and by Tom, who added the information that one of the purposes of the landing was to give mankind advanced technologies that would help ensure the survival of the planet, and also that a new age consciousness that was better adapted to the planned future scenario had been spontaneously developing among a minority of human beings. The theme of previous incarnations of John, Andrija, Phyllis, and Bobby was mentioned by all three communicators. "He was with you before," said Korean of Bobby on the 14th of March. And in the communication of 22nd of June, Tom said, "You have worked on many planets doing what you are doing now," and explained how Bobby had helped the rest of them through a crisis on a previous occasion. Healing and the energies involved in healing were subjects on which each of the communicators had information to contribute. "We were sending very strong," said Korean, after the aborted demonstration to the May Lectures Assembly. Andrija later explained how the sending takes place through the blending of male and female energies in the etheric, creating a kind of lens. From the start, Korean had said that Bobby and Phyllis should work together as a healing team. Andrija gave the rationale behind this recommendation, expounding the theme of the balancing of polarities and the need for a process of filtering and refinement. Bioengineering is another recurrent theme. I suppose we have to accept that beings capable of intergalactic travel might possess other kinds of technological expertise incomprehensible to us. But all the talk in the communications, a lot of which I have omitted in my précis, about sonars, implants and wiring, is the bit I find most difficult to take. But if consistency argues for plausibility, I suppose we have to suppress our natural repugnance for the idea of being messed about with biologically, and concede bioengineering as much credence as we choose to give to the other recurrent themes, for all three communicators talk about it. In the final session held in the Bahamas, Andrija asked Tom how they reconciled their bioengineering work with their repeated statement that they never interfere with free will, referring particularly to the implants that were supposed to confer paranormal powers on certain children. Tom replied, "It does not impinge on their free will, as it was their decision at the time of birth," which is a clever answer, and one consistent with a claim that such children are incarnated souls from other civilizations. Thematic consistency, and the fact that themes are enlarged upon coherently with different channels and different alleged communicators, certainly constitutes prima facie evidence that the information is not generated by any individual intelligence, human, spirit, or extraterrestrial, but exists independently of any such intelligence, and under certain circumstances becomes accessible. I shall discuss this point at greater length later, but now let's go on to the second impressive characteristic of the communications reviewed up to now. Evidence of supernormal cognition. A century of physical research has established, to the satisfaction of all but the most inveterate skeptics, that telepathy, clairvoyance, and precognition occur. As these are proven human faculties, evidence for their occurrence in the present context does not necessarily imply that the communicators come from an external source, though the circumstances of their occurrence in some cases do seem more consistent with this hypothesis than with the alternative one that the information was obtained physically by the medium. For instance, in the Ossining communication of 8th of April, Korean reproached Phyllis and Andrija for not giving a message to Bobby, as they had been asked to do the previous night. The fact that Korean knew that the message had not been delivered is significant, for it is unlikely that the knowledge could come from Bobby, who was in a trance and supposed to be the recipient of the message, or from the sitters, Andrija or Phyllis, for they were being admonished for forgetting it. Korean's explanation of the cause of the failure of the demonstration healing is a similar case to the above. After listening again to the instructions for the demonstration given in an earlier communication, Phyllis and Andrija suggested two reasons for the failure, but omitted the main one, which was that Bobby had metal in his pockets and on his clothing, a fact which neither of them knew. Bobby presumably knew that he had coins in his pocket, but he was in trance, and the very fact that he had the coins implies that in his normal state of consciousness he had no recall of his trance utterances. Ria's reports on Bobby's action and state of mind throughout the time the group were at John's house on Stocking Island were later found to be quite correct. Bobby had contemplated various means of suicide, including an automobile accident on his birthday. He had resolved to withdraw from the work, but at depth he was still undecided and struggling with this problem of confidence. Of course, Phyllis, knowing Bobby well by now, might have been able to make an intelligent guess as how he could feel and act, or she may be capable, like the seer Edgar Casey, of trance clairvoyance of a distant person's physical and mental condition. So the fact that Ria's reports were true does not prove Ria's existence as an independent mind, though it does strongly suggest the operation of paranormal cognition. Finally, Tom's insight into the causes of the negativity that disrupted the last session with Ria, and particularly into Lyle's feeling of being threatened by the role it was proposed he should play, is impressive evidence, for no one had anticipated that Lyle would be offered such a role, and he had had no time to tell anyone how he felt about it. Paranormal physical phenomena. The most incredible part of Andrija's account of his work with Yuri is his record of numerous materializations, dematerializations, psychokinetic and teleportation events. And I'm sure many readers of his book felt, if he wants me to take him seriously, I wish he wouldn't ask me to believe all this stuff. The present narrative raises the same problem. What we are to make of the story of the miraculous burn healing or the blow out of the transformer that terminated the attempted demonstration in London, witnesses to both events, about 60 to the second of them, vouch that they happened, and although for most of us human medacity is a commoner experience than physical paranormality, this is a poor reason for dismissing them as lies. The attitude, reality must be such and such because I've never experienced it otherwise than such and such, is not only unphilosophical, but fundamentally unintelligent. The cry not of the truth seeker, but of the man who seeks the fixation of belief. In later chapters I shall be reporting other incredible physical phenomena, and I confess that this is the part of the story that causes me most unease, although in connection with the work I have now experienced one or two things myself that have rather eroded my skepticism. With our Western scientific rationalist cultural background, which has been dominated for the last 3 centuries by the principles and methods of physical science, we find paranormal mental phenomena easier to deal with than paranormal physical phenomena. We are readier to concede that telepathy or clairvoyance might occur than that materialization or levitation might. This is a cultural bias, and we ought to recognize it as such, even if we can't or don't want to transcend it. Western science has been so stupendously successful in fathoming the laws and harnessing the power of the physical world that it cannot give credence to anything that apparently subverts known laws or manifests a power that it has not harnessed. Such considerations may help us come to terms with paranormal physical events, but they do not help us understand what such events may signify. In point of fact, some contemporary theoretical physicists may find physical paranormality easier to accept than does the man in the street, for the events resemble quantum events on a macroscopic scale. It is interesting and perhaps relevant to note that the physicists working in the field of superconductors and superfluids, the physics of very low temperatures, have observed quantum events occurring on a macroscopic scale, and to remember that Tom's answer to Andrija's question, where do you come from in this vast universe, was, we come from beyond your knowledge of light. We come from the zone that you would call cold. But this is to embark upon a subject that could have a chapter to itself, and which I shall return to later, when we have more data to discuss. For the present, I just want to leave the reader with the question whether the internal thematic consistency of the communications, the evidence for supernormal cognition within them, and for the occurrence of paranormal physical events in connection with them, constitute convincing or even prima facie evidence that the communications are what they purport to be. It is not necessary, however, to come to a decision about this at the present stage, for there is a great deal more of the story to tell. Today is the 16th of February. The next chapter is entitled Exits. Have a nice Sunday.